Hi, everyone, and welcome to Accessibility Talks, a monthly virtual meetup where we chat about digital accessibility, inclusivity, and usability. Each month, we invite a speaker to present on a topic, and we invite the community to ask questions and participate in the discussion. I'm today's host, April Sides. I am a senior developer at Lullabot, among other things, and a new member of the A11yTalks team. First off, I want to remind everyone that our group seeks to provide a friendly, safe environment. All participants should be able to engage in productive dialogue and should share and learn with each other in an atmosphere of mutual respect. So we require all participants to adhere to the Accessibility Talks Code of Conduct, and this applies to all community interactions and events, including verbal questions as well as chat and text channels. The Code of Conduct can be found on our website at A11yTalks.com. That's A11yTalks.com. I'm super excited to welcome today's speaker, Dr. Michele A. Williams, owner of MAW Consulting LLC, making accessibility work. Her 16 years of experience include influencing top tech companies as a senior user experience UX researcher and accessibility consultant, and obtaining a PhD in human-centered computing focused on accessibility. A W3C WAI invited expert, an international speaker, a published academic author, and a patented inventor, she is passionate about educating and advising on technology that does not exclude disabled users. Today, she will be presenting whole to part versus part to whole, how sighted and blind web navigation differs. For this talk, we have live AI transcripts provided by Thiston, and they're available courtesy of Canopy Studios. The link to the transcripts can be found in the YouTube chat. If you have any questions for our speaker throughout the presentation, you can post them on Twitter with the hashtag A11yTalks. Again, that's A11yTalks, or in the chat window if you're participating in the live chat. So to kick things off, I have a question for our speaker. You told me a fun fact about yourself is that you used your dream vacation to Italy to accomplish two firsts: hiking and horseback riding. That sounds like an amazing trip. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. So I always wanted to go to Italy for just reasons, right? It's, an awesome place to go. So I finally had the time, opportunity, no more excuses, and just planned all kinds of adventures for myself. I met up with a friend who happened to live in Europe for half the trip, and then the rest was just solo. So I got to do anything that I wanted, and I wanted to make sure I did things that were memorable, that were different, that were adventurous, that really created memories for myself and pushed boundaries. So that's why I ended up doing a few things that I ordinarily at least hadn't had opportunity. Maybe other people are saying, oh, that's nothing. But for me, particularly not really outdoorsy, horseback riding and hiking were pretty unique activities. And I did both, and they were awesome. So thanks for asking.
That sounds great, like a lot of fun. So with that, the floor is all yours.
Again, well, thank you everyone for joining, watching, reviewing. I'm going to share and get started. All right, so I think we're good to go. So welcome again to whole to part, part to whole, how sighted and blind navigation differs. So going ahead and diving in right away. The caveat for this talk is that this is actually somewhat more on the advanced side. So it assumes that you've taken some steps to at least attempt or start to learn about making accessible design. Now, in doing so, we understand that we need to design for certain types of consumers or certain types of people using the technology we're making, including blind consumers. And that often can sometimes be difficult to really understand. And that's where a lot of this presentation came from, trying to understand how not to disregard some of those best practices that make our designs as usable as possible. So essentially, what I'm trying to get us from is that we know we want to do it, but may not know how. I want to provide you a little bit of a nugget that may be able to help with that process. So going from there, we can even think about this in sort of 3 stages or 3 levels. For instance, we know that some technology is inaccessible. Where we're talking specifically about blind screen reader users, that may look like something as in the elements on an HTML page don't announce, right? Or they don't announce correctly. So we understand that to be inaccessible, and we know that that's not what we want. So then we move to accessible. Things like elements do announce, elements announce correctly in the correct order and the correct timing. And we begin to understand how to build that way. But I think that sometimes teams kind of stop there and think that they've achieved their goals when things announce on a page correctly or appropriately. But there's one more level we don't always consider, which is usable, as in the elements are understandable. And that's when not only do the elements announce, but I know what to do with it. I know what it means and what it's trying to convey. So I want to help get to that next level of usable by, again, emphasizing a really specific topic around the navigation that's happening with a screen reader. Now, part of this came about because I was working as a user experience researcher focused on accessibility at a company a few years ago, where the UX design team was presented a certain, design challenge or task, which was to create a lesson builder for instructions. So essentially, if you think about college courses, the students may get assignments either weekly or multiple times a week that look something like the sample syllabus I have on the slide, such as, week 2, certain topic, certain learning objectives. And then you'll be assigned a reading, maybe a quiz, a lab assignment. And when we're talking about electronic learning, then these would be linked out to something in your ebook or in some sort of digital format. So what the team was creating was the instructor's view of this. So how the instructor would pull from all these different artifacts, like from the book and like from your set of quizzes, to create the week's lesson, for instance, and post that for the students in their learning management system. So that was a design challenge. And I'll show you a wireframe that I created that high level explains what they created. So again, this is a wireframe. Don't take anything as final. And by wireframe, of course, we mean very just placeholder, getting the big picture. So to explain what the setup is, there's a heading at the top that I called lesson setup. I don't remember all the specific words and everything, but there was one heading at the top. And then the page distills into 2 columns. The first column pretty much right away had a search field, a search edit. And that was to allow you to search within the content of the book to find different assets that you would put in the assignment. Or below that, you had every chapter of the book. Now I have 10 listed here. That would be upwards of sometimes 30 or 50 chapters. Within that list of chapters, they were actionable in that you could drag and drop the entire chapter. And the equivalent of that was the little plus that I have here, which is the button to add. So you could either drag with the 3-dot menu with your mouse or add with the keyboard and hitting enter on that button. And then my little V's here represent an expand, because you could also select from within the chapter. So the different subsections or the different assets within a chapter, you could expand that like an accordion, and similarly add specific items and assets from within the chapter. So that repeats all the way down that first column. In the second column at the top, we have some set of form fields. I don't remember everything, but there were essentially a few sets of some form fields, such as maybe the week number, the due date, a description of the assignment, something key to identify not only that course, but that assignment. And then below that was the kind of drag area. So again, you could drag and drop assignments or assets to create the assignment. So there was an area with some sort of placeholder text, like drag chapters here, drag your items here. And that's where items that were in the assignment would be placed. And you could also rearrange them once they were dragged in. And then there was some sort of done or complete button underneath that when you were finished. So that's how you built a module or an assignment for your students. So this was, again, the high level design of that. And they did user testing with non-disabled users. And most of the instructors had good feedback. You may even be thinking, particularly if you are able to see this, you may be thinking, okay, this is, it's got good layout, it's got a grid layout, there's sectioned off, there's lines that designate the different areas, there's labeling and placeholder. This looks like, pretty good design based on the criteria that are needed to do this. I looked at it and said, this is going to be hard for someone who's blind to use. I tried to explain why, and the team just wasn't quite getting it. So I said, you know what? I'm a user researcher. And what do user researchers like to do? We like to do research. So my next thought was, okay, let's do UX research. This is a great opportunity. And this isn't us. I have a picture of a user research session that I just found online, but similarly, we did remote research. I recruited a variety of participants, but including 2 visually impaired participants. I had the stakeholders and the design team to come take a look, and I had the participants to try to do the same tasks that were part of the research with the non-disabled instructors. Well, in the sessions, the blind participants did struggle, as I suspected, but the observers didn't understand. So what I realized is that they were thinking that mindset, as I said before, of accessible, right? So they were thinking, well, everything announced in order, everything spoke the way that we expected it to. They could navigate with the keyboard. No one got stuck with the keyboard. The basics were there. And the person relayed back what was on the screen. They would hear a button, okay, there's that button, okay, there's that button. And eventually, the participants with some guidance were able to complete the task. What they weren't realizing, however, though, is that the participants needed guidance in order to complete the task. And actually, one of the 2 participants literally said, after exploring just the beginning part of the page, I give up. I don't know what's happening on this page. I don't know what's going on. And I would not be able to complete a task on this page. I would actually stop. But again, even with that feedback, my colleagues were not quite understanding that something was wrong, and not particularly understanding what would help fix it, even if they understood, okay, something went awry. So that's when it began to dawn on me that perhaps my colleagues weren't quite understanding the navigation and strategies that were occurring with the participants to be able to know that they were struggling and in what ways they were struggling. So that's where I came up with some of these ways of explaining that and the main point of the talk. So here's the deal. When someone is very low vision or completely blind, this is essentially what they're getting. And when I say this, I mean the black blank screen that I'm now displaying, the slide that is completely black. If you are a blind user, you do not have visual confirmations on which to confirm what you're hearing from your screen reader. You are only presented the words, the descriptions of what those words say, and then to some extent, the order in which those words are presented. So this means that you're creating a layout piece by piece. So one way to think about that for a moment is think about the room you're in right now, the room that you are sitting in and currently occupying. Imagine that you are situated in the doorway of that room, the room that you're in. If you are sighted, you can stand in that doorway, stationary, not moving, look around the room and understand almost everything about that room standing right or being situated right there. You can tell the size, the purpose of that room, what's in it, who occupies it, how empty it is, what are the main objects, how is it decorated, is it light, is it dark, all these characteristics of the room become apparent to you stationary and positioned in the doorway. So you can tell the whole picture of the room and then decide with your vision what to home in on, what parts of the room are most important to you to focus on. So maybe that's finding an empty seat, getting to the desk, getting to your bed if it's your bedroom. You decide what you want to focus in on, having the opportunity to have the whole picture stationary from that one spot. If you are not sighted and you're standing at that doorway, you can't get that information. Instead, in order to understand that room, you have to physically explore and systematically explore that space in order to piece together the information that would create for you the whole. You have to go in and pick up the information part by part to create the vision of, okay, this is the layout of this particular room. This is the purpose. This is how it's decorated. This is, where things are situated, right? So that's where the whole to part versus part to whole is coming in. Same thing on the web. And I'm purposely leaving this slide, this black slide here the whole time, because I want you to kind of envision this for yourself. So same thing on the web. When I'm presented a new page as a sighted or mostly sighted person, I can get that whole page's view, up to the fold. I can get that all at once and then decide what parts of the page are most important for the task that I have. As a blind user coming to the page, I have to start to put that together. I have to do an exploration. So with that, I actually want to not just have you take my word for that. We're actually going to watch a video from an interview I did with a colleague, Tracy Jackson. Tracy is an accessibility trainer and consultant, and also happens to be blind. Tracy is also owner of a consultancy, Phoenix Elite Solutions. So Tracy and I were making a video one day around this topic of exploring pages and exploring web pages. And I have a little clip of Tracy explaining this pattern of exploring a new page with his JAWS screen reader.
So when we access these pages, we don't allow JAWS to continue reading information. What we usually do in order to review a page is to move by headings. And with the JAWS screen reader, you can press the letter H to move between headings. And so I'm going to do that just so I can just scan your page, because that's how we get a quick summary of what the page is.
Okay.
M.A.W. Consulting LLC visited heading level, put accessibility into action heading level 2, services heading level 2.
And so based on what I'm hearing as I'm navigating your page, so if I'm looking to see what kind of services you have, now I can just down arrow here, or either do an insert down arrow for JAWS to read all and start hearing that information. Like if I did an insert down arrow, this is information.
Heading level 2 services. I'm Dr. Michele A. Williams, accessibility and UX consultant who can help your organization create technology accessible to people with disabilities. Figure checklist on laptop illustration, graph illustration.
And so it starts reading that information, and as you can tell, because you properly labeled your graphics, I'm getting the alt text and everything. So great job.
Well, we'll get into that in a minute. So far, again, we're getting in a lot of information. So we've got the fact that you would take your H key and navigate by headings. And then when there's a heading of interest, you then would read that information starting from that heading on down. I think it's also important to note that what you're listening to is very different than what we're seeing. It's almost like a linear view of the page rather than seeing the layout of the page. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. JAWS, basically from left to right, top to bottom, is the information is going to read. And if you have information in columns, JAWS decolumnize that information. And it loads information in what's called a virtual buffer so it can present it to us. And that's why using semantic code is so important, because if semantic code is not used properly, then the screen reader can't parse that page properly.
All right. So hopefully that came through. Let me escape out of that and go back. Awesome. So Tracy was again explaining this idea that there is a certain exploration that happens when a person reaches a new page. It's not that the screen reader just reads out, or that the person just sits there and listens to the screen reader read out the entire page, even though it can do that. There's systematic actions that happen, mostly starting with looking for headings and starting to build out a picture of what's on that page. So now let's revisit that UX design. In the UX design, there was again a heading 1 and then 2 columns of information. But how did that sound based on the strategy that Tracy described with heading, navigation, and then arrowing down? Well, first, if we did our H key, we would hear our heading level 1, lesson setup, or whatever that would be. But that would be the only heading on the page. So what that means is, from the screen reader user's point of view, everything else is at that same hierarchy of information. There's no other distinguishing characteristics or hierarchies. Everything is flat under that one heading. Keep in mind, by the way, as I go through this, just like I condensed the wireframe text and everything, I'm condensing what the screen reader is going to say for the purposes of just getting the points across. So we know that screen readers actually read a good amount of descriptive information, but essentially we'd hear heading, some form of heading level 1 and what that text was. Okay, so we're done with our headings. So now we'll do our arrow down, and that would lead us to our edit field, our search edit field. Okay, a little jarring because we're not quite sure the context of what we're searching, but that's what's there. So that's what we've got, and we move on. Then we'll start to hear those lists of chapters and the buttons with each chapter. Some form of chapter 1 and the text of that may have even been a link, I'm not sure. Then we definitely hear our add button, our expand button. And however you want to program that, design that, we'll leave that move for now and essentially say we'll get the crux of these 3 pieces of information: the chapter number and name, the add button, and the expand button, as we step through what information is on the page as we're arrowing down. Okay, so we've got a chapter. Then we'll hear chapter 2, the add button, the expand button. Okay. Chapter 3, add button, expand button. Chapter 4, add button, expand button. Chapter 5, add button, expand button. Chapter 6, that add button, that expand button. Chapter 7, that add button, expand button. Chapter 8, that add button, expand button. Chapter 9, add button, expand button. Chapter 10, add, expand. At this point, you're probably hoping I'll stop, and I will. But I did that in somewhat an exaggerated way to show you what would occur. And actually, a few chapters before is when that one participant stopped and said, okay, I don't know what's going on. There seems to be a pattern of these chapters, the ability to add, the ability to expand and see, and we might even do the expand to see what happens, which would just lend itself to another set of subsections and additional buttons. But what would make me know that there's something beyond these chapter lists? What would make me know that there's even more on this page? What would help me to understand the layout and the flow expected of me as a user? What is helping me to understand the interaction that's going to happen or is expected? How do I know what happens beyond expand? How do I know what happens when I hit add, for instance? How do I have any sense of placement and instructional, guidance for what to do on this page when so far I've only heard the one heading, the search field, and then a very long list of chapters? Again, if I really wanted to really explore this page, that would take me down about 50 chapters of that kind of readout. So this is where I was starting to try to get my colleagues to understand that this page visually is doing okay, but needed a little bit more to give information to those who could not see that visual layout. So let's go back and revisit our wireframe in the view like Tracy described. What's happening when a screen reader loads the page is that it's essentially loading it in a linear fashion. And it's reading the DOM, the document object model, line by line, as Tracy said, left to right, top to bottom, as if you're almost reading a novel. So you don't get the idea of columns and layout and position on the page. Essentially, what I've done with the wireframe is make it one column. So you have your heading, your search, your chapters, and then your form fields and your drag area and your done button. But think again, that list of chapters went on for what could feel like an eternity if you're stepping through it individually, without the understanding that that list has some bounds to it. So when we're looking at it this way, I don't think we're providing the same kind of segmentation that was intended by the visual layout. What if we did this instead? What if we added subheadings and we added instructions? The subheadings would be over the 3 sections that are on the page, such as book chapters for that first column, then assignment info for the second column in the top part that had the form fields, then something like included assets in the area, the drag and drop area, that had the placement for what you were including in the assignment. What if we also had a little bit of instruction underneath book chapters to say something like add items to included assets, something that triggers the action to add, but also explicitly lists the name of the section rather than relying on here or over there, these sort of characteristics that again rely on being able to see where you are on the screen. And then additionally, I altered the placeholder text in the included assets area just to say add assets here, something that might be just a little bit more descriptive about what is going to happen in that area. Well, if we do this type of wireframe, visually, I don't think that we've taken away anything from the screen. In fact, I think what we've done is just reinforced what likely was understood or deduced when we saw the wireframe to begin with. And as a sighted user, again, I have opportunity to overlook information. So if these headings aren't informative to me, if I just want to figure out what's going on, I don't have to read the headings, I'm not forced to, but they are there. And if I want help or guidance in what the sections are and how to engage, the headings and the instructions are available to me visually. Let's see how this translates now for a screen reader user. Once we do our H key, we would still hear our heading level 1, our lesson setup, but then we would hear our heading level 2, book chapters. Okay, there's a subheading, so there's a section on the page. Hitting H again, we'd hear our heading level 2, assignment info. And then hitting H one more time, we'd hear included assets. So now we know, and then we'd be at the end of the headings. So now we know there's actually 3 sections on the page. We didn't know that before. Then recall that we can jump around and explore the page based on the headings. So let's do that. So we've reached the end of all the headings. We know that there are 3 different sections on the page. We can start to build out that knowledge in our head. Let's go back to that first one, book chapters, and start doing our down arrow exploration from there. So then we would run into the text of our instructions, add items to included assets. Okay, we know included assets was a heading, and we're doing something about adding items to it. Now keep in mind that instructors are coming here with some context, right? It's not completely lost on them what they're coming here to do. They've performed some action to initiate creating their course. So there's probably some nomenclature and some instructions even before getting to this, but we still want to guide what this particular process is going to look like. So we'll have some instructions like to add items to that section. Keep exploring, and we hit our search field, okay? And then we start to hear the chapters. Chapter 1, add and expand. But now that add button has a little bit more context to it. because we had our instructions that we were going to add information to the section called included assets. And we understand that we're going to be adding to an assignment overall coming in. Keep going, and now we hear chapter 2, chapter 3 with our add and expand buttons, chapter 4, add and expand buttons. At this point, it's starting to feel like a pattern, but we kind of understand it in a different context now. It feels like we have the pattern of available book chapters or assets or sections that we can expand and collapse in subsections. And then there's the option to add it to presumably this included assets section. Let's jump to included assets really quick. So we'll do our H key navigation to get over to included assets, arrow down there, and that says add assets here. So presumably we've created the opportunity to formulate what this page has and what some of the interactions will be as we're doing this exploration by adding in those elements. Now, I keep saying likely, it may be understandable, it may be helpful, but this is what you should user test, right? So we provided the foundation of a page that is explorable, that provides that baseline of being able to get around the page, understand the basic building blocks of that page, and understand a little bit about the interaction. And then the user research could come in and say, do we have the words right, the interaction right, is it understandable? That is where that user research could come in and provide value in terms of the feedback around what's in that wireframe, for instance. But returning to overall what just happened, basically what changed was in the design and in the consideration of the layout, we emphasized the importance of navigational cues. We emphasized the importance of laying out the page in a way that didn't just convey information by visual distinctions such as placement or spacing, but using words and also HTML elements that can be accessed by assistive technology like screen readers. So essentially, a few of those that we want to call out in general in terms of web design would not only be headings, but even stepping one step back, might be HTML5 regions. So a region is, that would not be visible on the page, but regions are the HTML tags that you can set around the different areas of a page that you do visually distinguish, such as the header or a banner at the top that usually has, say, your company logo and the navigation and the search at the top and is persistent on every page. You can designate that in the code as your banner and give that context to an assistive technology user like a screen reader user, the same way that a sighted user understands that that visual horizontal means that that's some sort of navigation placeholder. Same thing with navigation, nav, that might be on the side. Main, which is your main content. Aside, like maybe an aside is your list of other blog posts or your list of related news stories. And then the footer, which usually has information like your copyright statement, your address, even maybe how to sign up for your mailing list. We visually do this by color, position, layout, but there are tags available in HTML to designate this explicitly so that, again, when someone does not have that affordance of being able to see the layout, they can still get that information and navigate with that information. Revisiting headings, which is what we just went through, headings are important for structure of the page. There's a main heading, there's usually a subheading, you might nest them. This is sort of the basic building block of a web page and something that we should be continually keeping in mind and doing as we're building out our experiences so that people can understand those segmentations. They can skim visually around the page more easily. And then also, again, as we just saw, a screen reader user can even navigate and skim in their own way based on those tags and those designations. Another important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about making a page operational and easy and usable, particularly when we're talking about screen reader navigation, is a logical layout. Keep in mind, again, what Tracy said about the fact that the page just linearizes. The equivalent of that is stripping the styles away, like if you were to strip away graphics and style sheets. Imagine that page is just the words, the raw images, and that text plain down the page. A logical layout says, at least put things in order that makes sense. Some of the ways that we see this not happening, for instance, are on a form where you have the submit button, but then you may have a checkbox or some other information underneath that submit button. That's not a logical order. As someone who does not see the screen or see that full view, it's easy for me to miss that, because if you tell me there are, say, 5 form fields and then a submit button, I'm going to assume that's the end of the form and I'm going to submit my answers. So if there's information below that, that's not a logical layout. That assumes that I'm going to be able to see that before I hit the submit button, and we don't want to assume that. Same with the copyright statement or the all rights reserved statement on your website. That kind of triggers or signifies the end of a page, that all the rights and copyright apply to everything before that. So if I hear the copyright statement at the end of a page, I pretty much know that I've reached the end. Similar to an email, when you hear the regards or the other signatures, you know that you've reached the end of that email. Putting information below that, again, is an illogical layout and assumes that the person can see an entire view of the page, of the email, of the screen. And that can be disorienting, that can be dangerous, that can be just not true. And we don't want to rely on that as we're laying out our digital artifacts. Last one I'll talk about is descriptive link and button text. Another thing that screen readers can do is pull out just a list of, say, links, because a person doesn't necessarily have to navigate your page the way that you laid it out, right? Tracy was hopping around my page, going from heading to heading, and then reading information of interest. Well, same with links. I don't necessarily have to go all around your page to access your links. The screen reader provides opportunity to just bring up a list of links so I can activate the one I want. But if they all say learn more or click here or something else that's not really descriptive out of context, that's not helping me to use that shortcut effectively. And again, assumes and presumes that it's going to be easy for me to read that link in the context of how you positioned it. So if I do anything to change the format of the screen where I can't see the screen, then the context of that link might get disrupted as well. So thinking about how to keep in mind regions, headings, logical layout, descriptive link, and button text is going to be important for allowing users to best navigate a page. And really, I'll say that what I just mentioned is just good user experience. The first principle of that comes to mind from user experience, for instance, is recognition over recall. That's one of the 10 heuristics that is the building block, again, of a good user experience. That basically means make things obvious. Don't rely on the user's memory to recall how to do something. Make it recognizable, make it an instruction, make it a heading, make it the text of the link so that I can recognize what to do rather than have to constantly recall it or deduce it. And then similarly, in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, there are several guidelines, including headings and labels. But there are other guidelines as well that fall right in line with the user experience principles too, which is, again, have the information like headings and labels and make them informative, make them useful. Basically, keep in mind that when you're creating digital artifacts, say like a website or a web application, you're creating something that a person is meant to use, a person is meant to engage with, interact with, and even complete a task with. So you're not creating just a static, maybe work of art or interpretive, design. Yes, there's room for innovation, there's room for creativity, there's absolutely room for pushing the boundaries of how we present that information. But I think sometimes we may go a little too far in that and forget that we're supposed to also make things usable, make them user-friendly, make them understandable and intuitive and even enjoyable to use. And some of those building blocks are known for decades, that we should do. And sometimes I think we just get away from it. So I want to combat just a few things that sometimes come to mind when we talk about, say, adding a heading to a page or adding instructions. The first is that most folks will say, well, isn't that just for screen reader users? Can't we just make that invisible, off screen? Sighted users don't need that. Sighted people do need those. And the way to think about it is that sighted people are piecing together information too. It just doesn't feel as pointed. So when a sighted user is looking at that page that did not particularly have the headings, they were piecing together what was happening on the page too. For some people, it just goes quickly, or it happens pretty fast and without too much laborious effort. But that's not the case for everyone. There are people who just aren't tech savvy. There are people with cognitive impairments and neurological differences. There are people who just don't pay attention to all the web's nuances and all the new ways that we're presenting information on the web. There are people that are just infrequent users of some of the interfaces that we create. So I think that we disregard the amount of work that is happening when someone has to deduce what a page is rather than be told what a page is. And I think we need to be more mindful of that. And someone could even calculate that if you want to, but we know that people are spending time on this, and really we could be taking some of that work away. Also, we don't necessarily think about low vision users. And when I say low vision, I mean people who need information on the screen magnified to a large degree. Those users are typically using magnification. And if you're not familiar with that, I'll reference you to an Inclusive Design 24 talk that a colleague and I did last year called Responsive Design versus Magnification, Designing for Users with Low Vision. Because in that we demonstrate that navigation that happens when you're using magnification. And it's actually very similar to using a screen reader in that you don't see the full screen all at once. You're seeing portions of the screen because of the amount of screen size and screen real estate that is taken up by this magnified view. So similarly, you are piecing together what's happening on the page, even though you're technically using your vision to do so. So there are benefits across the gamut of people that are visiting our digital experiences that benefit from those foundational navigational pieces. The other thing that happens when folks learn about assistive technology and these different paradigms of how someone is navigating the screen is they kind of go the other way and want to go overboard and add a lot of descriptions or add a lot of detail. That's not needed either. You don't want to go too far in terms of adding in what information might actually become a little too distracting and hard to navigate. Just keep in mind that yes, the paradigm is different. For instance, we just saw it's very different exploring a page without vision and with a screen reader than with vision and just looking at the page. However, the assistive technology is providing that opportunity to get that information differently. So screen readers are providing the opportunity to hear the content versus see the content. They've got that covered. You just need to provide that good design that allows the person to navigate accordingly with their assistive technology. Again, there's opportunity to improve upon assistive technology and improve upon how we even go about navigating digital experiences. Certainly things like AR and VR are coming right around the corner. But for the most part, keep in mind that you don't have to overcome anything that you think is a deficiency. You just need to remember the basics and the best practices. And then lastly, don't pity assistive technology users either. One last thing that often happens is when people really understand what's happening, say with a screen reader, with magnification, with voice control, any assistive technology that's new, they might feel like, oh my gosh, that's so overwhelming, and even start to feel like it's unfortunate that the person has to navigate the computer in that way. No, that's simply just just keep in mind that the person is simply using the device the way that they use the device. Again, there's opportunity to improve on everything, but it's not opportunity for you to have a negative impact or a negative feeling. Instead, get educated. So get more comfortable with these differing ways of using the computer. And that might include having something that Yahoo used to call user nights, where you bring in disabled folks to sit when it's safe, when it's COVID safe, sit with your engineers and designers side by side or remotely, and have that person show you how they, with their assistive technology, would navigate what you built. Also, you can just continually create community connection with local and national organizations so that you build up this understanding and knowledge for yourself. Shout out to a particular viewer out there who got me on Twitter, particularly to follow what's known as disability Twitter. And that is in education for sure. If you can connect with people, particularly on Twitter, who identify as disabled, you'll learn a lot about what actually is going on in a community maybe you're not too familiar with. And then lastly, lots of blogs, articles, opportunity to hear, again, first-person accounts of disability and in terms of real life as well as digital life. So lots of opportunity to not pity someone, but just empower yourself to understand what's really happening, and then empower yourself to make experiences that are usable and work best for the folks that are coming and experiencing your artifacts. So takeaways, wrapping up. This was a very specific talk with a very specific topic. So I hope that it was helpful or will be helpful as you go about designing. Just to wrap up key takeaways, implore you to think beyond visual presentations. So think about adding navigational cues in your design and in your code. Think beyond the person will deduce this, a person will understand this, once they look at it a little bit. Instead, use your words, use your copywriters, for instance, on your team, and think about usability. So think about being able to test understandability, not just access. So I'll say thanks and just read off really quick how you can connect with me if you want to. So again, I'm Michele A. Williams. That's Michele with one L, Michele. And on LinkedIn, I'm Michele A. Williams, PhD. If you want to connect with me on Twitter, I'm at MAW Consulting LLC, but that's consulting without the I. There's a character limit on Twitter. So MAW Consulting without the I, LLC. And then I'm mawconsultingllc.com on the web. So I thank you for this, and I will open it up for questions.
All right. Thanks, Michele. That was a really great presentation, and we do have questions here. So I'm going to go ahead and get them started so we don't run out of time. Our first one is from Andy Foster. How would a website that has cards with call to action in each card be accessible?
So they are. So that's more depending on how you want to program that. Hayden Pickering, Heydon Pickering, I believe has some resources around accessible cards that you can look up, but they're definitely not necessarily inaccessible. So basically it's just a matter of what kind of container you use, and then making sure that your buttons are actually buttons and labeled accordingly. And then you just navigate according to that.
Next question from Anna Sophia Colati, probably mispronounced that. Hi, great talk. I have a question. I read somewhere that placeholder is not read by e-readers. How do screen readers get that content?
Right, so placeholder in particular is not advisable, particularly in your form fields. Depends on what you do. In that instance, that area was not a little more different than what would normally be in a form. And you can force placeholder text to read either using ARIA or maybe even, well, I wouldn't say title attribute, but you can get placeholder text to read if you need to, but placeholder text actually isn't advised, and that would be something else to probably consider in that design, is to go ahead and replace that with some other instruction above that section. So definitely there were some areas of that design that could have been improved upon, but decided to show it the way that we tested it just to get some of those points across.
Great. Our next question is from Kim Lovering. If the headings really make UX react adversely, do you have any major concern with visually hiding the headers so that they are for screen readers only? I think you may have addressed this a little bit about it being necessary for both.
Yeah, there's a reason to put them for everyone.
Yep. And then Andy Foster again said, would it be a good practice to declare the number of chapters in the example that you were showing with the list of chapters before they start exploring these links? Not sure, but not sure how, but just a thought.
Yeah, so that's, again, that's the don't go overboard, right? So that's the other reaction people have. We'll add more descriptions so that people understand, what's happening. That can get just as distracting as not having enough information too. So you don't need to do that either. You don't need to add in things that summarize what's on the page or describe what's on the page. That's going to come out through their exploration. And keep in mind that screen reader users can increase the rate of speech to be pretty rapid, and they can cut off speech. They can navigate pretty quickly, just holding down a button. There's lots of ways that screen reader navigation can move more quickly through something that has a pattern. And it actually wasn't all that useful to know how many chapters either. The point was to know that that's where the chapters were. And then there was actually a search field if you wanted to narrow it down. So there's a lot of reason why not to go the other way and start adding descriptions and adding information on the page. You don't need to do that either. There's definitely a balance.
Great. Our next question is there a point where describing each time gets in the way of repetitive tasks that would allow a person to accomplish tasks faster? Basically, at what point is it too descriptive to be useful?
So that's where your user testing can really come in, right? Because there definitely are some balances. There are opportunities maybe to add more keyboard functionality for keyboard users, for instance, things like that. So it really just depends on the task. However, particularly when you're talking about screen readers, you have to keep in mind that screen readers are taken care of a lot, particularly JAWS has a lot of functionality, for instance, for jumping around based on the type of element, bringing up lists like lists of links, being able to jump by element type. So you don't need to overdo it, right? There's usually you actually do not want to say that you are designing for a screen reader, for instance. You want to say that you're designing just to make sure that the interaction is understood by everyone, has those basic good design principles and building blocks for everyone. And then the screen reader user is going to navigate accordingly around those elements that you've set up. So there's very few times when you need to specifically say put custom keyboard navigation in place or provide custom other types of descriptions or shortcuts because most of the time that's going to be handled automatically by just doing the basics of the page and letting the person navigate the way that they normally would.
Okay, great. Our next question, this might be our last question, we'll see. Are there ways to find users with disabilities to help us test things while ensuring we pay them for their time?
Yes, there are a couple of ways. If you don't have direct access, for instance, through an organization, there are a handful of firms, at least from the US perspective, and in other countries, there may be other resources but from the US perspective, one such company is Knowbility. So Know, Knowbility. They provide recruitment services for user research. Then also there's a Canadian company, Fable Tech Labs. They are a full service user research firm, but they, I think, well, they have a test bed of users as well that you can connect with. Or if you hire a user researcher, of which I'm one, then that user researcher would help you to recruit. For instance, that's something I'm doing for a client right now. We have a particular project, so we're putting out feelers to the community to research, to get research participants as well. So you can also just put out your own call for research, right? And then the NFB, the National Federation of the Blind, last I checked, they had a user research community as well that you could pull from within their members if you're particularly looking for blind and low vision participants.
Great, those are all great resources. I have one follow-up, and this will be the last question. How early in the design development process is best to have a person with disabilities test our approach?
So that depends. Really, though, as early as anyone who didn't have a disability, right? So if it is useful to be getting user research at all phases of your building, then get user research at all phases of your building. Disregard disability. Now, you may need to alter how you approach that accessibility research. I have a talk about that too, not to keep promoting things, but I actually did a talk about how some of the ways you can adapt your user research methods to make sure that they're accessible. But essentially, you can always have a conversation, if nothing else, about what you're building. And there are ways to present what you're building in an accessible way so the person, depending on their access needs, can understand what's happening and then provide you that feedback. So at all phases really is useful. The earlier, the better.
That sounds great. It'd be great to have some of these links that we can share with everybody who's watching for later. Well, that's great.
Yeah, we'll put them in the description, yeah.
Awesome.
So just to recap and just,
Okay.
you know, so I know thank you all for watching it. Again, my goal really was to help you understand what a screen reader user is doing and what they're trying to gather, and then how that might help you to understand how to review your visual designs. So the biggest thing is review your visual designs as if you're reading a book. Don't review your visual designs as if you're hopping back and forth with the understanding of the full view. Review them as if you didn't have any of the visuals and read it top to bottom like a novel. In that view, do you think that people would really understand what's happening on the page and be able to understand that interaction? And if you're not sure, you can ask some folks, but if you have a feeling that there may be opportunity to more explicitly distinguish what you have visually on your screen, there's opportunity for you to provide things like headings and maybe some additional instructions for users to be able to do that. So just want to summarize that and make sure that folks get that.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that. All right, I think that's a wrap. So thank you so much, Michele, for sharing your expertise with us today. It has been a pleasure. The links mentioned during today's talk will be available when the YouTube video is posted online. And we're always looking for new speakers, and we make a conscious effort to include marginalized groups in tech in our speaker lineup. So please let us know if you have ideas on how to make A11yTalks more friendly and inclusive to all. Also, be sure to join us next month when Albert Kim presents Bridging the Alley Gap, Mental Health and the Next Generation. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, A11yTalks, to never miss a talk, or follow us on Twitter at A11yTalks. That's A11yTalks. Thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Bye.